This is very important, which is that for a while, what we were trying to understand was the relationship between China and Russia and how exactly China was looking at this conflict, whether it was positive. There does seem to have been some sort of green light from Xi Jinping, or at the very least, like he probably knew about it before it was going to happen, given their meeting at the Olympics before the invasion. At the same time, there's been speculation as to whether and how much support the Chinese would give the Russians. They're going to buy their oil, but so far have not shipped them any weapons and are becoming very uncomfortable. We're about to talk about Taiwan in a little bit, because it actually just showed you the tremendous political response that would come. Like Ukraine, which is, look, let's be honest, like, emotional, but not as nearly economically important. If that's the response there, I mean, just consider what it would mean then for the Chinese. It was very eye-opening, and also in terms of what inferior military can inflict whenever you're literally fighting for your life, and especially with Western support. So what happened very recently in Uzbekistan at this conference, where both Chinese President Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi of India was a very stiff arm from both countries publicly towards Putin. And that is a genuinely shocking event, because it just shows you how isolated Russia is, even with ostensible allies, or in the case of India, not an ally, but a non-aligned country who's like, we're in it for ourselves.
They were really trying to be neutral.
They're like, look, we're friends with this is what they did during the Cold War. They're like, yeah, look, we'll play with the Soviet Union, we'll play with their, like, who's gonna pay us more, which, how can you blame them? Yeah. All right, let's put this up there on the screen. So from the Financial Times, what a lot of people are viewing is that the Xi and Modi made clear at this conference that while they'll appear with Putin, they are, quote, not standing with Putin. Modi's comments were the most significant. Whenever he was with Putin, he specifically said in Hindi, which was then translated directly, and by the way, they know exactly what they are saying. This is the direct English translation from the Indian government. Today's era is not an era of war. He specifically told that to Putin in the bilateral meeting. That was in diplomatic speak, that's like a backhand across the face. That's like, I don't support what you're doing. I want this war to end as soon as possible. He's like, yeah, I'll take your oil at a cheap discount and I'll sit down with you because you send me a lot of oil. But don't think for a second that I'm like supporting what exactly you're doing here in Ukraine. It's very much I'm in this for myself. I'm not going to listen to some of the Western finger wagging at me. But don't think that I'm just sitting here and supporting exactly what you're doing there. Putin was a little bit caught off guard, because here's what he said. He said, we will do our best to stop this as soon as possible with the concerns that you constantly express, meaning also that it appears that Modi has been saying this to Putin behind the scenes now.
This was not the first time he was aware of his displeasure.
Exactly, not the first time that this was made. And that also came after Putin acknowledged Xi's, quote, concerns. So what happened there is that Xi Jinping expressed, again, remember, this is very specific diplomatic language. Whenever you listen to the Chinese, they pick every single word extraordinarily carefully. They know exactly what they're doing. And with this in particular, Xi Jinping expressed, quote, concerns over the geopolitical environment and the fallout from Ukraine. So to have both those leaders say that to the face of the Russian president, who ostensibly, been cast in the Western media as allies, but making very clear, they're like, yeah, look, we'll buy the oil, and we're not going to go as far as the West, but we are not supporting what you're doing here. That's very important. I mean, that shows you how geopolitically isolated. They don't have real steadfast allies in the way that, Axis powers and others in the past would have. So it's a big lesson.
Well, and with India, I mean, it makes perfect sense, because you've got two things going on. First of all, you have what were humiliating defeats for Russia on the battlefield. So they're looking at this and they're going, oh, you are not winning. In fact, you're losing. And this looks bad for, for China. They're like, this looks bad for us. India's like, I don't really know if I want to be on your side, because this doesn't look like it's going all that well. But probably more importantly, India has obviously developed incredibly rapidly and made a lot of gains in terms of their economy. But this is still a nation that has a lot of poor people who, are very sensitive to food prices, fertilizer prices, all of these things. And so food prices have spiked, and, they are really hurting because of that. So I think they're also looking out for their interests, and it shows that they don't really buy what Putin has been trying to sell is just like, the escalation in food prices, the escalation in energy prices, that this is all just because of the Western response. And India is not really buying that line. Obviously, listen, we've talked about the Western response is definitely part of that, but the original sin here is Russia invading Ukraine. So Modi not buying that. They say in this article that he didn't raise any, quote, contentious issues around Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity, but rather focused on issues around the war's impact on areas such as food security, fuel, and fertilizer supplies. The increase in food costs has been devastating around the world. Yep. I mean, you cannot possibly overstate the impact of the increase in grain prices, bread prices, and also fertilizer. Like, the difficulty of obtaining sufficient fertilizer really makes it difficult for these countries, not only in the short term, but for, seasons and seasons to come. So patience seeming to run thin with some of the major countries that have kind of, if not been allies of Russia, have been happy to sort of support them in certain ways that have been critical. Yeah. They're telling them basically, you're kind of on borrowed time here.
Right, and also for Putin to acknowledge it. I mean, he opened his speech with Xi Jinping being like, we understand your questions and concerns. It's like, we will answer them here at this meeting. Look, he's on the back foot, even with his so-called allies in the middle of Samarkand, he's getting, not smacked around, but the great powers of Asia, India and China, making it clear, we are not 100% behind you. Like, just because we're not with the West does not mean we're with you. So to have that situation for him, it's a big, big problem. All right, and then let's move on to the final part here, breaking out of the 60 Minutes interview that just happened last night. So, well, first of all, yeah, the Russians, in terms of what's happening on the ground, the Ukrainian offensive continues to go forward, not nearly at the same lightning pace. At the same time, however, Russia is closing in actually on a critical city in the Ukrainian east. So this is a little bit further east of where the Ukrainian offensive had been. They continue also to attack in that eastern region despite the setbacks, and making it clear that they're going to shell the currently reoccupied positions by the Ukrainians and to make it as difficult for them to hold the territory as possible. So we'll continue to cover that.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.